Hi. Well, really excited about today's episode of The Courageous Choice and honored to have Jen Smith here with us today. She's a fellow HR and talent leader and the host of the Flourish Careers podcast. Thanks so much for being with us today, Jen.
Jamie, thank you for having me. This is a delight.
It's really an exciting opportunity to kind of hear about your journey. One of the things that I'm really, passionate about is the courage that it takes to kind of find your own path. And our careers crossed paths actually multiple times. Once at a Fortune 50 organization, and then you went on to continue to do great things at other large organizations, and then really made a choice to kind of take a big step and create your own organization. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey and what led you to launch Flourish Careers.
Yes, thank you for this question. It's a meaty question for sure. At the core, I truly believe that career success doesn't have to come at the expense of a happy and healthy lifestyle. But this belief came after a very winding and meandering career path. And so I'll just kind of take you back to the beginning real quick. My first job post college graduation was working the graveyard shift as a frontline supervisor in a potato chip factory. So I will tell you that there's nothing happy or healthy about that. But you mentioned Fortune 50 organizations. This was for Frito-Lay, which is part of PepsiCo. It's a fantastic organization, and I will tell you in this role, I learned more about leadership and business than any other role. So it was a very formative part of my early career. And I stayed with Frito-Lay for 8 years. So I started in operations for 4 years, and then I pivoted into human resources. And this was one of those moments where you have like a skip level meeting with your boss's boss, and they're like, "So, Jen, what do you want to do with your career?" And this deer in headlights moment, like, I have no idea. And so I really just kind of paused and reflected and figured out what I loved about operations and what I didn't love. And it all kind of pointed towards the HR side of the business. And so raised my hand and said, "Hey, I'd love to get into HR." And the lovely leaders at PepsiCo said, "Well, Jen, you don't have the best experience that we look for in HR leaders. You don't have the education. You don't really know anybody in that space. No." And so I did what any stubbornly ambitious professional would do, and I created a plan and ended up signing up for every HR initiative you could imagine. And raised my hand. There was a junior level HR role open at a location that nobody wanted to move to and they couldn't fill the role. And so I raised my hand and said, "Hey, let me give it a try." And went through another really vigorous, rigorous interview process and ended up with that role. And then I've spent 15 years in corporate HR across three different industries. So I went from food and beverage manufacturing to tech distribution, Jamie, where you and I first connected. And then I'd spent another 8 years at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And so I was kind of all over the place in HR. I went from business partner, talent management, talent acquisition, and wasn't really like sure any of it quite fit perfectly. And then this world of online business started popping up. So the Marie Forleos of the world were doing really cool things with online businesses. And I was super drawn to that lifestyle and the creativity of that type of work, which is when the little seed was planted in the back of my mind to try to do something on my own. And it took a long time. So fast forward 15 years. Now I take all that HR experience and turn it into my career coaching and HR consulting business, where I'm really on a mission to help folks align their careers. And this is a process and a philosophy I call heart-based career planning. So it's not spending 15 years trying to figure it all out. And there's some of that. I think some of that is really, kind of necessary, especially in the early years. But really helping people find alignment in individuals within organizations and teams and feeling much more fulfilled in their work. So
That's
that's a little
so
bit about the
amazing.
backstory.
Yeah, no, I feel like that tenaciousness and experience in those large global companies trying to navigate your way, it has to come in extremely valuable to those that you're coaching on their own career journey. And how do you kind of navigate, the no's or the resistance that they might get when they feel like they have that intuition about something they're interested in, and how to kind of find that today in corporate. I know, we both value our time with corporate, even though now we're kind of living a different kind of career.
Totally. Yes.
So, as you look back in all of that, I mean, I heard a lot of courageous things as you were talking, but what is the most courageous choice that you feel you've ever made?
Yes. I think the most courageous was that final step from corporate into this I call it self-employment, this world of self-employment. That felt the most courageous, the scariest. I always kind of describe this as it's like this, like a super gentle push from behind you. It's like, "Okay, go do this," and then there's so much resistance in front of you. It's like, "What are you doing? This is crazy. No." But then it just never it's like this dance between these 2 places, and I always just told myself, like, "I don't wanna have any regrets. I want to give this a try and see what happens." And so I just trusted that I was gonna give myself a chance, and I told myself I would give myself 1 year. I was like, "Just do this for 1 year and see how it goes," and we're going into year 6 at this point. So
Amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, some people describe it almost like jumping off a cliff, or, this feeling of like, you're just leaving kind of the known structure,
comfort.
right? Yeah. That
Yeah.
comfort, that comfort. Okay. So you
Mhm.
shared a little bit about you felt like there was something just in your intuition. You knew you were supposed to do it. As you were kind of getting up to that pivotal decision, how did you know you were ready? What led up to that?
I don't know that I knew I was ready, but, um, so what I ended up doing, I'll tell you. So I kinda started small. So I had that seed in the back of my mind, and I started small just and I call this, I use this now in my practice. I call it 5 minutes to flourish. So every day before I started my day job, I did one tiny thing to help me step into this new direction, whether that was I don't know, emailing someone and asking them about their path or researching websites. I don't know, just anything I could think of. I just did one tiny thing almost every single day. So the consistency of that 5 minutes really added up. And then what ended up happening was I started career coaching as a side gig. I got hired with the Muse, which is a pretty well known career platform. And so I was a coach on their platform. And when I noticed my energy so I would do, like, career coaching nights and weekends, and then the day job during the day, and I noticed, like, the energy of the career coaching, even though it was nights and weekends, was so much more than the day job. So, like, that balance, it just was completely unbalanced, and I was like, "You know what? It's time. Like, I've done enough to get me to a point where, like, I had a website, I had, started working with a couple clients through the Muse, especially not so much through Flourish, but through another platform, which I think is a really good strategy if you wanna start something on your own. And so I just, like, did all of those tiny things, started the side I think it was too, like, once I realized people would pay me for career coaching, that was another, like, really big moment where it's like, "Okay, I can do this and at least give it a try for a year and see what happens."
Isn't it fascinating? Like in today's world, organizations are figuring out that they can hire for specific skills. And then as individuals, for us to almost recognize those things that really do give us that energy. And, for many of us, we kind of downplay, I think, what we maybe comes easy for us, and is a strength, but it's harder for others. And then when you're like, oh, people are going to pay me to do this. Like that's incredible, but you're probably that's where your magic is. That's your sweet spot, right? So you're giving the best of yourself in a way that's really valuable to others, and yet finding your own joy in that. It's kind of interesting. I know we both have these conversations with lots of people who are debating, do I make a similar kind of choice? And there's a ton of fear and perceived risk that comes with that. I mean, I can feel it like in the pit of my stomach, right? What what were the fears or perceived risks that you kind of felt as you were leading up to that change?
There were so many because this was over such an extended period of time. There was, financial fears. There was the what are other people going to think fears. There was the letting go of all these shoulds or this identity that I had known for so long. I mean, it was heavy. It really weighed a lot on me. And and it ended up just giving it ended up getting to the point of, like, this experiment, like, let me just experiment and give this a chance just to see. But, the financial obviously, like, when you're in corporate, you have a steady paycheck that comes every week or every other week, and when you do this work, you don't, and so that's really scary. And I remember talking to Jeremy, my husband, and I said, if this ever gets to a point where like, I can't cover, like, my portion of our family's needs, like, I will get another job in corporate. Like, I won't let that burden fall on your shoulders, and I've lived up to that. Like, there's never been any issues with that, and so but it's just that fear of, like, the steady paycheck versus something that's probably gonna ebb and flow a little bit. And then the what other people are gonna think, like, there's so much stigma around this type of thing. Jamie, you and I have talked about that before. But it got to the point where I was like, it's not their life. This is my life. Like, I don't really care what they think, like I need to go do this for myself and just give it a chance. And then I'll tell you what was really interesting is like sometimes I was worried about what other people would think, but then ended up, like, getting messages from folks like, "Oh my god, you're so brave for doing what you did, like, tell me how you did it," and so it was, like felt like the people that needed to hear it from that inspiration or that expansion heard it. So, yeah, so there's so many risks, so many fears, all the things, but you just do it anyways.
I so appreciate you verbalizing it, right? Because I think that there are fears. There's identity shifts, there's letting go, there's the stigma, I mean, consultant, is that a four-letter word? Did it mean you couldn't get a job? Like, no, actually, you were like a rock star, top of your game, lots of choice, and just had this voice that you tuned into and finally decided to not ignore. I find it really fun because I did a similar thing. Like, I think for almost anyone thinking about going out on their own, you gotta figure out what the game is for you. So for you and talking to your husband and saying, "Look, if I can't carry my weight, like, worst case scenario, I'll get another job," right? And it was kind of the same thing for me. Okay, I have savings. I had a certain amount that was just like, okay, I don't have to be so uptight up for a minute, I mean, and I can get a job, right? There's this like, okay, it's a plan B. And even if you don't have to lean into it, just knowing that it's there kind of provided some comfort. I don't know if that
Yes.
worked for you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because I can't remember exactly the savings piece, but it was definitely like there was savings there to help support this as it got up and running for sure. So yeah, thanks for that reminder. It's a good call out.
No, and I think it's really fascinating because, you mentioned stigma, right? And how people think about consultants and now that, gosh, almost 50% of the workforce is choosing to participate in the gig economy. So many people are making this leap. And so, you get kind of lots of people that are coaches, lots of people and that's my whole thing is how do we know who's good and what they're good at? And so we spend a lot of time talking about that. But okay, so you get over the fear, you get your husband's very supportive, you make this big leap. Was it clear from the beginning what you wanted to focus on, or was that a bit of a journey as well?
Yeah, no, good question. It was not. I always had the idea of coaching and consulting, but I had no idea what that was going to look like. And so it's funny because I left corporate at the end of 2019. So December of 2019 was my last month in corporate. And then little did I know what was going to happen in March of 2020 when the whole world shut down. So I actually, it's interesting. I went and did in January of 2020. I was invited to a local HR meeting where I presented some potential consulting things that I could do around recruiting and talent acquisition, early career strategy. I had a whole room of HR folks. They were super interested. There was a line after the meeting to talk to me about how I could help their teams. And then the pandemic hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did I just do? I just left this steady job and now the world is falling apart. And so I thought I was going to start with on the consulting side. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh my gosh, I have all this extra time and space that I didn't have before to help all of these people that are navigating loss and uncertainty and doors shutting and all of these things that I was like, "Oh, wow, this is really a blessing in disguise." And so I ended up pivoting and doing mostly all of 2020 really was all career coaching as much as I could do to help folks with all the chaos that was
Transition.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that ended up to be a huge blessing. And then, Jamie, it wasn't until really you and I met that I got back on like, okay, what is this can this consulting side actually look like that has been just, such a great addition to like this portfolio career.
That's I love that portfolio career. I sometimes I call it preferment, where you, like, do what you prefer, but it's like you earn it, right? I mean, you said 15 years, with 3 large organizations, learning, being a high performer, growing in your career, being persistent to, like, find a path, and then you launch and you kinda were like, "Okay, how can I add value?" Right? Like, responding to the market you found yourself in 2020, and really value to others. And even on the consulting side, it's like when people are in their sweet spot, like the incremental value that you add is so much more valuable to organizations and so much more rewarding as an individual, right? Like, so okay, so we're making this sound really easy and smooth, and I'm sure that it wasn't always easy and smooth. For those who might be listening and want the reality check, what challenges have you faced and have you navigated them?
Well, the first challenge was the pandemic. So that was a huge I'll never forget. I think I heard on the radio, which, they were saying something about University of Pennsylvania told their students to not come back after spring break. And when I thought about the sheer logistics of students not returning after spring break and all their, just like the logistics of their stuff and like their school year coming, I literally lost my breath. I'm like, what is happening? Every day I was just like doing meditations and breathing exercises just to like trust that this was going to be okay. So that was a huge challenge that I just kind of shared, ended up turning into be something, but it was hard for a couple of months. And I ended up joining a career coaching team that was fabulous. And they had a lot of, intake. Like, they had a lot of folks that were coming through, and so that really helped me, in terms of, like, the amount of work that I had and all the things, and so that was really fabulous during that time, but then one of the challenges, that partnership shut down. So then here I was again, that was a lot of my income coming in, and then when they decided to close their doors, I was like, "Okay, now what?" So I think, like, the learning from that is having a few different I think that portfolio again, a few different streams of income has always been really helpful for me because then each of them kinda ebb and flow. So I have, like, the Muse, I've been part of their talent community or their Coach Connect platform since 2018, and, like, I can turn that up and turn that down until I got, like, Flourish Careers became a brand and people started recognizing and referrals come in. So it's like, you kinda have to think about it as, like, knowing that it's gonna ebb and flow, and then just what is your strategy to help that, to help those ebbs and flows. And then the other thing that I really learned, I guess I don't know if this is a challenge or what you want to call it, but I really think about like what is enough? Like how do I redefine success and like what does enough mean to me? Where it's not like getting a 10% or 5% bonus or, increase every single year. It's more about like, hey, I have enough to live a very comfortable lifestyle. I'm not second guessing anything. I'm working in alignment with my strengths and my energy and my values. And um, you know, that's more important to me than, kind of the steadiness of a paycheck or whatever you wanna call it. So, I don't know, those are some of the things that come to mind when I think about challenges and navigating them.
That's actually really huge. Do you mind if we double click for a second there? That idea of like kind of redefining success and is really fascinating because I think it remains a challenge for many people who make this leap. People say, I do it for lifestyle, I want to have a more balance. And I always say, like, if you're not creating that balance in a corporate structure, you are not it's not gonna automatically happen in a gig or on your own, right? You have to create that structure for yourself because otherwise you just I mean, you could fill your time as much as you wanna fill your time. What were some things that you did to kind of either remind yourself of that choice, or did you any practices you put in place to kind of find that right mix for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of trial and error, just kinda seeing what works, but, like, the biggest thing for me is my time, and my time is my most valuable resource. I spend a minute, it's gone forever, and I know that, and that is like the core of everything that I do. And so I don't want to waste my time. And not to mention, when you work in this capacity, your time is money. So that's like another, yeah, right. So you kind of just have to like lean into that and set your priorities. Like prioritization became a huge piece because you can't be everything to everyone and you can't do things for free. And you have to just let people know that and set those boundaries. So like prioritization became a huge piece of this work, and I set 3 priorities every week, and that's where my time and energy goes. So I, and it's, again, it's going to be different, quite frankly, for everybody, just depending. I don't know, Jamie, if you have anything to add that's worked for you in that
I
sense.
love the 3 priorities every week. I think the what I've sense as attention sometimes is the fear, right? So I wanna take everything that comes my way, but I can recall when I first made the leap in 2018, there were some things that, like, I could do, but I was not the best person to do them, and anytime I said yes to those things, I I regretted it, and so recognizing that or learning that and then being able to say, "No, I have somebody better for you," and that was part of what led to gig talent, but like, because it wasn't my sweet spot, so that wasn't honoring not only what I went on my own to go do, which was the things I'm really good at, it wasn't honoring the client either because, I probably shouldn't be managing your leave of absence or whatever the thing is, right? So getting people in the right sweet spot, but as a person, that fear can maybe be a gap where you wanna fill the time, and I think so your point of being focused on the most important things, doing the work to get clear on, like, what really does bring you that energy and joy and what your intent for creating your own practices and the value you really wanted to deliver to clients. If you can stay in that and that be kind of your guide in those decision makings, um, if you leave the space for the right stuff will come is kind of something I've experienced, right? But it can be super uncomfortable because it might mean you have no income coming for a little while or no revenue and you're trying to figure that out. So I think I like your idea though. If you have those 3 priorities for the week, it's like if you do the right activities, it'll lead to the right stuff. It's just not always in the package or timing exactly like we want it, right? And sometimes it's a great surprise.
Yes, exactly, and that made me think of, like, defining in the corporate, in kinda old school, it's like defining success as, like, the next level or the promotion. When you work on your own, you don't have that, and I really truly believe our world of work is changing so much that we need to define success through experiences versus titles or anything else. I think I looked up once recently, there's over 12,000 job titles in the United States. I mean, I don't know really where to, attribute that to, but it was something wild like that. So, our world of work is evolving and changing so much. So, if you can think of your success in terms of the experiences that you get to have and, the different projects that you're working on and how you're growing as a person versus a title or a salary, your career, in my opinion, becomes so much more fulfilling and so much more interesting versus like someone else's agenda or checking boxes or, getting forms submitted, whatever you have to do, in that world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, or validation, either by a paycheck or whatever. Like, not that I mean, we all need to make an income, I'm not saying that, but I love that definition and the experience, and then that turns into the impact you have, which is where your value is anyway, right? So it can serve. I love that. Okay, so as you reflect now, you've been out, you're doing your thing. It doesn't sound sorry to all the companies that wanted you to be your default, decision. You're doing your thing. So, what have you learned, in summary, kind of around courage, leadership, or resilience?
as I reflect back and I was thinking about this just and some recent projects that I've been working on as well. And Jamie, one of the things I wanted to mention to you was that I love that you use the word courage with this show, especially because I think people think about confidence a lot, but confidence, in my opinion, is a result of the courage to take action. And so it's a lot of people are like, I just don't have the confidence or whatever, but confidence is a result of action. Confidence is a result of taking one courageous, tiny step after another. And I think that that is super powerful. So I would say, start, the I guess, like, the tenacity, the courage to start small with those tiny actions because they will lead up. And then the biggest thing for me is just surrendering, like, listening to that intuition, listening to that voice, and just knowing that you're taking the right next step and just keep taking the right next step and it's going to lead to something. So those are the things that come up when I think about learning about courage.
That is so powerful. Courage comes through action. I I I mean, I got chills when you said that. It's so true, yeah, so true. Um, so 2 final questions as we kind of wrap this up. Storytelling can be really powerful, and I know we both worked with some really amazing leaders. Is there any story that you'd like to share of a leader that you particularly respected for their leadership courage?
So I'm going to go back to my early career. These are just some of the most formative times I feel like, but I'll tell you a story. When I first moved into human resources with Frito-Lay, part of PepsiCo, it was the time that Indra Nooyi became the CEO of PepsiCo. And she is such a fabulous trailblazer. And so I'll never forget in this manufacturing facility that I was working, our leadership team had gotten together and we got this like package from our new CEO, Indra Nooyi. And this is totally gonna date me, but at the time there was these like booklets and there was a CD in there. And we put the CD in the computer and it was a video of Indra. And she was right there and she's so down to earth, so visionary at the same time, and she shared her performance with purpose strategy and how she wants to balance like the people and the financial part of the business. And I still can remember this moment, and she made bold decisions like the acquisitions with Tropicana and Quaker, and just such a fabulous leader. But literally from day one, when we got this CD and then watching, and I guess it was like, video content wasn't a thing. So it was like one of these first like videos of a leader, and everyone gets nervous when there's new leadership. But it took the nerves of all of us like right down because we saw her, we saw what she stands for, we knew what the vision was. And it was like we were ready to go and we were ready to follow this person after this video. That's how authentic and motivating that she really was. And so I just have always been super inspired by her.
So inspiring and such a to step into that large role, to be able to make change in a huge ship, to inspire those to come on board right away and kind of share her vision. That's incredible. That definitely takes leadership courage. All right. So our final thought is, what advice might you have for others that could be facing tough choices or something that might need some courage?
Yes. I would say if you can even get one tiny glimpse of what is on the other side of what you are trying to do, use that to trust that glimpse. Follow whatever that nudge your heart is pulling you towards, because my guess that it will be better and more amazing than you could ever have imagined.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm so honored that you joined us today. I hope you'll join us again in the future, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.